Just a moment. Message from Jackie that she's in a waiting room somewhere. I'm not sure. Oh, there she is. All right, Jackie, you are with us now. All right, thank you very much. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 12th version of this meeting. Let me share my screen, pull up the PowerPoint slides for today. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just a few notes, meeting being recorded. Board members, guests, our panelists, please stay on mute. We will have meeting minutes and recording posted in the public board meeting page, and there's an email address for any public comments. Here's the agenda today. Reverend, if you want to get us started, call us to order.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all, and good to be together virtually and in person. And hope you had a great summer, because it is gone. It's still warm, but I was sharing with you tomorrow. I was excited to see a yellow leaf this morning, full fall bloom. So looking forward to that, and hope everyone has some decent plans for the fall. Should be some good hiking still available out there. But yep, looking forward to today's conversation to talk about a number of different items that we discussed for the last meeting, and some developments, obviously, as we kind of keep track of things moving forward in the 10-year plan and a couple other things. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and I'll turn over to Mike for some logistics about the rest of the meeting.
Oh, I think I jumped ahead of you, Reverend. I apologize. I already did that without, paying attention. So yeah, just that was that initial. Go back to the slide before. Yeah, that was just this. I already covered that. Apologize.
Oh, did you?
I got ahead of you there.
I didn't even hear you. All right, it's all good. I was looking at something over here. Yeah, that's all good. Everybody has a meeting agenda, I hope. And so I think we're on to share any good news, anything that's worthy of note as we start today on the upside. Good news, anybody?
Well, I'll jump in. If y'all want to come up to Steamboat a week from Sunday, we're going to have our fall ride and drive. We'll have the most vehicles we've ever had, and we now we're trying to get a Tesla Cybertruck, but we haven't tracked one of those down. But we are going to have a Porsche all-electric EV, so that's good, and we're still have some afternoon slots. So not this Sunday, but next Sunday will be the fall ride and drive in Steamboat. I guarantee perfect weather, changing of the colors. So y'all are welcome, and come on up.
That sounds awesome, man. Thank you, Paul. Other good news, anybody?
Can it be like an event?
Sure.
Well, we will be hosting our first energy efficiency clinic.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be helping folks apply for weatherization assistance program, vehicle exchange. And that started because Michelle and I presented in different communities, and there was a lot of interest, but a lot of questions on the applications, just the hesitation on how to fill it out. So now we're offering that.
Wow.
So we will see how that goes. It will be in Westwood on October 10th from 5:30 to 8. And once I have the flyer ready, I will share it.
Yeah, please do. That's exciting. You said in Westwood?
Yes,
Wow,
for Westwood Community.
That's awesome. And this is the first one of those?
Yes.
That's exciting. Wow. Yeah, that sounds really great. Thank you. That is good news. Anybody else?
I'm just gonna share some good news to make sure we got this announcement in the place. Last meeting, we had talked about, the home charging program, Mika Burdette, shared about that, so we appreciate the board's feedback. But we are planning to launch the RFA for that program, I believe September 26th. So moving forward with that program, and just wanting to let everyone know that that is, we're looking for that coming up soon.
That's awesome. Home charging, you said, Mike, right?
Right, rebates for people to upgrade their electrical panel for.
Oh, yeah,
charging.
yeah. That's awesome. Good morning.
Sorry, we're trying to make sure that the screen is doing the thing it's supposed to be doing.
What do you want to be looking at?
So I guess I just want to be sure so it's showing people's faces as well as the
Oh, no.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think they can. It's just because you have two screens right now,
I have two screens right now.
technically.
Okay.
Any other good news?
Just, can you guys see the PowerPoint? Being shared?
Paul, can you see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, so something's going right somewhere. I just can't see that it's going right. Thank you. That's, I appreciate that.
Let's see.
All right. Any other good news, anybody? As we try to.
Reverend, I'll share. This is not energy or air related, but in a couple of weeks, there is the peak of what I had just recently learned is a tarantula migration that happens in Colorado. If any of you have heard of that, it's the hot spot is in La Junta, kind of, and the La Junta community has really embraced it. So end of September, they do like a tarantula festival, and apparently it's male tarantulas that are looking for mates that, you know, they don't come across the street in droves or anything, but if you Google it, like, you know, you'll go at sunset and see some. So I convinced my partner and my daughter, and we're going to go down for a night and experience this tarantula migration in Colorado in a couple of weeks. So it was like totally new news to me, and I've been here for over 20 years. So wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you very much. I think maybe we should move our board meeting that month. All good.
It's in a couple of weeks. It's come on down.
I've definitely heard about that. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else good news? All righty. Well, I think we are ready to roll. Well, yeah, sort of. So we're well, everybody can see the agenda and the presentation, so I think we'll be all right. So thanks everyone for sharing good news. Always good to hear those things. And wonderful to start the meeting. Good to hear from everyone too. So at this time, we'll just approve the minutes from our August meeting, and we'll take a motion to approve those August meeting minutes.
I guess I was the first to unmute, so I will make said motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, Laura seconded. So all those in favor respond by saying aye. Or thumbs up if you're online. All right. Do we have enough, Mike?
I think everyone is here, all the board members.
Okay, here we go.
So
Yeah.
assuming everyone voted.
Yeah, I think so. Just minutes. Yeah. So I think we're good. All right, motion carries and the minutes have been. Yes,
If I
sir.
could, for the record, since I was absent on the last meeting, I'll have to abstain from the approval of the minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Did you get that, Mike?
I will abstain because I joined, and I don't know, maybe at the end.
Mid-meeting or something. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. We get note of that, Mike?
Yes.
Yes. All right, thank you. All right, thank you so much. So with that, we will move, glad to see Matt Mines with us, and appreciate the work you've been doing, Matt, and excited about hearing from you today, and yeah, so take it away.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just I think we thought we would provide an update on the classes program, which is receiving a significant amount of funding from
Right,
the enterprise, and so wanted to keep you guys updated
yeah,
on how things are progressing, obviously. I think last time I was here was maybe fall 2023, and so right, we have
maybe since then once.
another year. Okay, cool. Yeah, I know, gosh, my life is a blur. I was looking at the presentation, and some of the information I think reflected the
Yeah,
fall round and didn't have our most recent, we've had a recent round, and then we have a currently open round. So some of the things I guess I could say about the currently open RFA are pretty limited, just
right,
because it is
okay,
an open competitive RFA.
Right.
We closed our Q&A, so some of the like programmatic questions may be limited in terms of what I can answer,
okay,
but certainly can provide you on all the progress we've made to date
Awesome.
on our 2 rounds.
That sounds exciting.
Which has been, exciting. I think some good progress being
Yeah.
made and a lot of good projects in the queue.
Can I ask you a quick question? Is that a
Please.
real bridge?
I think that's the one by Redcliffe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if you head up
That's
from
amazing.
Minturn, so you turn south on 70 towards Minturn and keep driving. I think that's the one you cross over from, if you keep going from Minturn to Leadville, you
Mhm.
can turn into Redcliffe, and that's that bridge.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair, if
heck
I
of
can
a-
add on to it, yeah, it's probably one of our most picturesque bridges in Colorado, following US Highway 24 near Redcliffe and between Louisville, as Matt mentioned. So excellent picture, by the way.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's thanks to CTO, the tourism office. They hired a professional, so that's not my picture. But very cool. It's one of their kind of efforts to
Yeah,
support like our scenic byways and tourism efforts and
Mhm.
electric vehicles. And
yeah, beautiful.
I mean, they took a whole bunch, but I just always use that one.
Yeah,
It's
that's a great picture.
It's so nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it really is.
it makes me want to take a trip.
Yeah,
Which is,
absolutely.
nice. Next slide, please. So just kind of as a refresh on the Plazas program, because I think we do have some new board members, maybe since the last time I spoke to this program. Our Plazas program is using both community access enterprise money as well as funding from NEVI, which is a federal source of funds from FHWA. And so with the 2 pots of funding, we're kind of funneling it into this single program and facilitating projects statewide. And so the enterprise provides funding for projects outside of what NEVI would fund. They have pretty strict limitations, and so the enterprise affords us pretty considerable flexibility, which has been, I think, just very beneficial to the success of the program and EV charging in Colorado in general, because the limitations from NEVI are pretty restrictive. It has to be along alternative fuel corridors, which there's a limited subset of. It has to be within a mile of a highway interchange. And so really, the community access enterprise is enabling us to invest in, alternative locations or more community-based locations, which is huge.
Yeah,
So between the 2 sources and the 2 rounds of funding, we've awarded about 32 million total, 10 million from the enterprise and 22 million from NEVI across those 2 rounds. And so each round, each year, we have to provide an updated plan, which we recently submitted. We being the collective state, that was CDOT that submitted it. So CDOT has submitted this plan to FHWA, kind of setting forth kind of updates to the plan, how we plan to intend to proceed, as well as kind of progress to date. And that was due last month, and so we're pending approval on the update to our current plan. We did receive about 57 million from NEVI, and then of course concurrently supplementing that with the enterprise. Both sources of funds kind of mirror the minimum specifications for the program. So it's 4 ports, 150 kW chargers or more. Next slide, please, Mike. And so with that, we have an open application round, as I said. So I can only say limited things to the actual funding or the actual funding round. But we do have a round open. We opened it end of July. I think we were the first state to do 3 rounds with NEVI, which, you know, we've really benefited, I think, from having our infrastructure programs in place and being able to kind of efficiently roll out funding rounds and, you know, consistently offer funding through the Plazas program in a way that, you know, if you're a new state to this sort of, you know, program and projects, working on standing up the infrastructure to support offering the funding, the application rounds, et cetera. So yeah, pretty excited to be developing this kind of pipeline of projects. It's been a pretty significant focus of ours, is having these long duration projects get in the queue and then, you know, award funding, because, you know, they could be a year or 2 years long from award to project implementation and completion, I should say. And so, you know, there's a lot of focus on opening the sites as well, but of course, right, like there are things outside of awardees' control, and so getting a significant number of projects in the pipeline, I think is going to be to our long-term benefit.
Yeah.
But we have tiered the incentives, and so depending on where you're at, this is something we did several years ago, and then kind of right-sized with the influx of the enterprise and NEVI funding. And so we had tiered the incentives based on kind of market demand, market maturity for the metro area, front range, and then rural parts of the state, anticipating potentially lower utilization in, you know, outlying parts of the state where there may be fewer EVs, you know, similarly high cost but lower utilization, making it a harder kind of prospect for investment. And so that's where we, you know, tiered the incentives based on those regions and understanding sort of what applicants were proposing to us and what they were willing to, you know, fund themselves, how they were willing to match our grants versus you know, the funding that we needed to provide to really incentivize that investment, which to date I think has been a very effective aspect of this program. Providing a cap per port certainly allows us to invest more and yeah, just more diversely, which is huge. You know, the federal dollars don't have limitations really on a cap per port, and so that's something we implemented independently of them. And you know, these are high cost projects, and so if we, you know, if we cap it, right, then awardees are matching our dollars and, you know, assessing kind of the viability and what they're willing to accept, rather than us, you know, just footing the bill for whatever 80% is, and, you know, not incentivizing that due diligence amongst applicants for cost-effective projects. We do provide incentives, enhanced incentives for projects in disproportionately impacted communities of 5,000 per port. We also provide enhanced incentives for battery integrated chargers. There's chargers that have it integrated within the actual fast charger, and then there's standalone storage. We have had projects do both, you know, battery integrated as well as standalone storage, which is compelling. You know, it helps and facilitate projects, especially in areas with low utilization or high demand charges where the business case may be pretty challenging. And so by offering each of those options, right, I think it just enables more projects to happen in more locations throughout the state, where, yeah, previously it may have been a challenging prospect from like a charge point operator perspective. This is a hard map, kinda, especially, you know, I'm a pretty colorblind person. So I have to crawl into the map.
It's successful for you.
And so I think they have. I provide. I mean, I have like the regular tester of that sort. I think it works. I just like get pretty close to it. But kind of looking at kind of how the coverage has progressed, right? So we are, you know, working. The requirements of NEVI require charging infrastructure every 50 miles. And, you know, from our perspective, right, we want to invest more broadly than, you know, just the highway corridor. So we have identified gaps that are outside of the alternative fuel corridors where we know there's kind of feedback and market demand for infrastructure, right? There's many communities within Colorado that aren't on alternative fuel corridors, even though we're one of the few states that have designated a large number of alternative fuel corridors. We were one of the few to designate more after NEVI was announced, which was interesting. I think others kind of pulled back and wanted more flexibility. So once you complete your NEVI build out, you're allowed to invest those dollars elsewhere in the state. It was kind of the strategy around it from other states. It's like, well, you know, we don't need, if we don't designate more, we'll have more flexibility in the future. And so, you know, with this is identified, and we have another map kind of where the remaining gaps are that we're striving to meet, and how, you know, our investments both through NEVI and the enterprise are going to fulfill and complete these maps. And so I have another map coming up. The next slide, please, Mike. And so I guess just as a baseline of where the state was 4 years ago about this time, you know, we had about 40% of the state covered, and, you know, still, right, we had investments being made at this time. We were, you know, again, a beneficial state to have funding in place pre-federal support. And so in 2020, this is what the infrastructure network looked like in Colorado, right? There was, I think, of course, far less coverage than we have now. And, you know, just to baseline the significant progress we've made over the last 4 years. Next slide, please, Mike. In June 2024, we have pretty significant progress and coverage made since then. We're covering about 80% of the state. And these two maps reflect the actual infrastructure in the ground. And so a lot of those dots on the map, right, are being facilitated by some of our other programs. We have our fast charging corridors program, which was recently completed. And, you know, that has really developed that backbone or that infrastructure that we're looking to then complement with the enterprise and NEVI funding. And so, to me, very exciting, especially understanding that this is, you know, charging infrastructure that's actually in the ground. And these maps reflect a statewide goal rather than the NEVI goal. And so the requirements are more stringent. This has a 30-mile buffer instead of a 50-mile buffer that NEVI requires.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we are making great progress for, you know, that statewide travel in an EV. Again, this doesn't reflect projects that are in the queue. And I have a map in a little bit that demonstrates what those are. But one of the things that differentiated this application around for plazas, I can't say too much about it, but we have identified priority areas for investment. And so we, you know, historically have had a gap map, a planning map for folks, kind of folks who would want to install charging infrastructure, just to understand where the gaps remain, right? To do it in sort of just a transparent way, how we understand the market evolving. But with 2 rounds of NEVI and kind of that long duration of projects, you know, if it's 1 to 2 years for a project to be completed, we did want to identify specific communities that are really required to help us reach our statewide goals. There are communities listed here that aren't on alternative fuel corridors. There are communities that are, you know, just consistently come up as feedback through different avenues. But the majority of them are on alternative fuel corridors that, you know, we need infrastructure there in order to be able to spend our NEVI dollars elsewhere. And so this round we did shift and kind of specifically identify communities which we haven't we have not done really since our corridor program, where
That's
we
great.
kind of mapped it out, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see what the response is to this. You know, how many of these communities, there's 20 here, how many of these communities we get a response for or a proposal in. So we will, you know, be looking at these pretty invested. We're very invested in infrastructure here. Slide, please, Mike. In terms of what was accomplished in round 1 and round 2, those projects are at, you know, various stages. Some we're still working on contracting for, from kind of that round 2, which we closed in, I guess, last December, but then we made awards in April. Life is a blur. I'm like digging into the recesses of my mind.
Early 2024.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe it's late 2024 at this point. So that we have, you know, projects at different stages, right? Site design, utility coordination, NEPA review. Some have started construction. The sites that were proposed in those 2 rounds reflect, you know, between 4 and 16 ports per location. So the minimum specification is 4 ports per site to meet, you know, kind of the requirements of the program. We do have many applicants proposing more.
That's
You know,
great.
6 to 16 is pretty common. With varying power levels, 150 kW is that minimum specification, all the way up to 350 kW. We have numerous applicants kind of looking to, you know, meet that highest spec that's out there now, which is 350.
So is 150 still considered fast charging?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and that's pretty, I mean, that is pretty darn fast,
Mhm.
you know, especially if you look at like your charge curves of your vehicles.
Mhm.
You know, the typical vehicle is going to charge at that rate for, you know, kind of a short window, and then it tapers.
Yep.
So it's pretty good. You know, historically, fast charging started off at 50 kW.
Okay.
And, you know, those
Wow.
are kind of getting obsolete at this
Right.
point. You know, if you're charging a large capacity battery, that's going to take a little while at 50 kW. So 150 is pretty good.
Yeah.
Many folks are exceeding that. But long term, I think it's going to be pretty viable. You know, if you look at, yeah, charge curves basically of the vehicles and what they can accept.
Mhm.
And sorry, all the things. We can, yeah, nerd out on that maybe in the Q&A. In terms of the CAE funding, we have provided funding to communities that, right, honestly wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Some Buena Vista, Highlands Ranch, Fort Collins, that was too far from the highway. Aurora, Lakewood, those are ones, Dolores, those are communities that would not have happened otherwise. And you know, there's some more beyond that, but it's limited to my slide space. But this is, you know, I think those are exciting projects, right? Fort Collins is a large community that has not had significant fast charging investment, right? As a result of the enterprise, it is happening. Which is pretty huge. Dolores is, you know, it's along a scenic byway. It's off an alternative fuel corridor. Again, that's a location that would not have happened without enterprise support in a rural part of the state.
Yeah.
The awardees from the first 2 rounds are kind of indicated on the right there. I would describe it as an exciting mix of folks, right? There's couple local governments, there's some smaller businesses, and then there's some convenience stores and large corporations kind of entering the fold. It's been interesting to monitor, you know, kind of what the other states are doing and who's being awarded elsewhere in the country. So yeah, just a fun thing to watch kind of the market play out as more and more states award funding. We've kind of been at the leading end of it, where, right, we were, gosh, we're the second or third state to roll out funding at the very beginning. And so it's kind of that test bed, one of the first states to do a second round, and I think the first to do a third round. And now we have more states completing their first and second rounds and seeing how awardees are being selected and who is applying for this program. This program being heavy. Just very interesting, very nerdy, but very interesting. So a cool mix of folks, and yeah, great projects. Next slide, please, Mike. So here's that kind of map that indicates not just where the charging infrastructure is in the ground. If you kind of recall that June 2024 gap map or buffer map, this map reflects round one, round two. It reflects existing infrastructure, round one and round two awards, as well as those priority communities that we've identified. And so, you can see, right, kind of from that prior buffer map, the Eastern Plains were still a gap. We have projects in the queue that I think will largely complete the Eastern Plains from round one. The Eastern Plains received proposals for most of those locations. So those are all the squares heading up the Eastern corridor. Round two, we had numerous proposals around the kind of southern corridors.
Those are
So
stars.
those are the circles, which is cool. So really great progress. And then if you see kind of the starred pins, those are remaining gap communities that we have called out. And if we can get chargers in those locations, we're going to be in a really good spot in terms of a full network around the state for travel. And then it's going to continue to be like redundancy. So we'll invest more in high traffic areas, along corridors, just to ensure that confidence to be able to travel. And then, more deeply investing within communities. But pretty solid progress when you consider what's in the ground as well as what's in the pipeline.
Can you explain what the triangles, rectangle, and I don't know if I see circles.
Yeah, the triangles are in the ground. So those are chargers that are complete.
Okay.
And then the squares are round one. And then the circles are round two.
Okay.
And then, yeah, the pins are kind of the priority identified communities. What else we got going on there? I think that's it. And then the image on the right is just construction happening on a site in Highlands Ranch.
And
So-
then I see like dots, are they like special routes?
The dotted lines, the
Yes.
light dots along the corridors. Yeah, so those are still kind of remaining gaps.
Okay. got
But
it.
then, yeah, like with that infrastructure kind of in place, like, so if you think about like the squares and circles, how those gaps would be closed essentially. But in terms of the current status, they are still gaps.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
this is an interactive map actually on CDOT's website, so it's publicly available. It's the gap map. And so, yeah, you can, deep dive into the communities and see how it is developing. And yeah, nice construction picture. And I think we had our first NEVI project kickoff recently as well. So this is an enterprise funded project that has kicked off. So
That's great.
some good progress being made. And yeah, it's very open to questions and feedback, etc.
Thanks a lot, Mike. We appreciate your presentation. It's a really helpful update. A lot of work being accomplished. Thank you for that. Any questions or feedback for Mike, anybody?
So this is Paul, Mike, good job. You have an open kind of rolling RFP process. Is that how these applicants come in? Or is it like a start-stop application period?
Yep, it's start stop. So we'll stop it on the 20th of September. And so we opened it end of July. Typically, they stay open about 60 days, just given the, the complexity of the application and extensiveness of it. So we keep it open 60 days. And then, yeah, we'll close it next Friday.
Okay. Cool. Nice work. It's good, exciting to see all those gaps get filled.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just maybe for a future presentation, it'd be very interesting to see utilization differences among stations that are currently in place, if they're kind of matching up against what we think urban versus rural, et cetera, where there's just a higher density of EVs registration wise, or if doesn't really matter. It's more about who's passing through. And not to highlight, all the great stuff that's happening with the program, but I'd be really curious also about anything that's holding up projects or, creating downtime or, to kind of identifying if there are themes with that, because it's expected without question. So
Yeah, I mean,
I'm curious what might be at the heart of some of those issues if you're seeing them pop up too.
Certainly for the projects in the pipeline, the biggest thing is transformers.
Yeah.
It's a national issue, right? But there are certainly utilities with it worse than others. And it's depending on the size of the transformer. We heard from a project recently that was quoted 120 weeks, which is pretty wild, right? Like, I mean, we'll still be doing a lot with them. There's a lot to get done in that time. And hopefully that was the worst case scenario, is 120 weeks. But, and maybe the utility wanted to set a low expectation and exceed it. I don't know. But yeah, that was a long one, because essentially that will not be energized until, December 2026. Which is
coming from the utility space, it does not surprise me at all.
Yeah. I mean, 50 weeks is within our general assumption. 18 months is pretty reasonable. 120 weeks caught my attention. So that's, I would say, far and away the biggest thing, right? All the other stuff that has to be done, if you have 120 weeks, you can get, a permit is a challenge in a lot of areas, but like, it's a long time to get it. NEPA has been pretty efficient.
Okay.
So that's, that's a pretty streamlined process through the program, because it has a categorical exclusion. And so that doesn't mean it just is like, immediately approved. It does go through a review and approval process. It's just a more streamlined thing. And that only applies to the NEVI projects. We don't do NEPA through the community access enterprise, just because that's kind of a federal program. But all that certainly is progressing well, I think.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Other questions, anybody for Mike? Well, I was curious about, well, first of all, it's wonderful to see the progress between 2020 and 2024, like really exciting. And also really great to see the spots that are being prioritized and identified for, future development and infrastructure. That's really exciting. And then my questions revolve around, kind of, to be honest with you, that opening picture kind of brought to mind something I was talking with Mike about, and that is like maybe the connection between where the plazas are going and sort of the natural tourism, of the state, and like how that, if that's taken into consideration when the planning is, going on. I mean, I imagine it is, but
Like traffic volumes and all that.
yeah, as you go like the I-70 corridor, and I noticed kind of going southwest sort of, yeah, is it, I heard you talk about demand, of course, and then feasibility of investment, but is there also consideration given to like, like Steamboat Springs is on the list? Obviously, as Paul mentioned earlier, that's a huge, hotspot for tourism, et cetera. So do those things go into the planning of where we're going to put plazas?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a consideration in terms of like, yeah, traffic volumes, some of the other needs, especially in those like tourist areas, right? We frequently get
Yeah.
requests for like level 2 chargers at, condo associations, et cetera. But right, if we can supplement that with large banks of fast chargers in each of those kind of resort communities, I think that's going to be to the benefit, and a dense network along, right, like I-70, which is a high traffic area.
Yeah.
We're certainly, I think, cognizant of sort of the additional need, where you don't just have more traffic, but you also have road grade, you have
Right.
temperature challenges, that are, can reduce range, et cetera. So
Yeah,
grade
absolutely.
reduces your range, temperature can reduce your range.
Yeah.
And so having a dense and robust network along kind of those high traffic areas is definitely a consideration. I think we'll, invest in like redundancy, supplement what's already existing just based on some of those considerations. We'll have to have a pretty dense network to facilitate, the vehicles of the future, right? If these are 2-year projects, right, the number of EVs on the road in 2026 is going to be pretty considerable if we're at 140,000 currently. So
it's like I was sharing with Mike, like I have conversations periodically with folks in my community or other spaces about driving an EV to the mountains, right? And just like 10 days ago. And so the big issue in the conversation was, well, Reverend, there are not enough chargers between here and there, so I'm just not doing it. I'm like, yeah, there are chargers. But so I went back and started looking at the map, and I see there are chargers, but it caused me to wonder, like, one, obviously that's outside of your range, but is that promoted at all? Do people know about it? And then two, I thought about, so when I drive an EV, my wife and I go to Avon a lot, right? So between here and Avon, there are chargers, but they're not that frequent, right? And so unless well, obviously you got the charging maps on your cell phone app or whatever, but I'm just wondering if at the kind of popular road stops along I-70, if there are plans for chargers there to try to pull in that kind of tourism crowd that's going to the mountains every weekend to ski, and if they know that, hey, the state is trying to really bulk up our infrastructure as it relates to wherever people are going, Steamboat Springs, wherever, Glenwood, have you. I just think that maybe those things could work in tandem, like meaning the increase in purchase of EVs alongside the infrastructure that we're creating. I mean, I'm sure that's something you all already think about, but I just wonder, as I'm looking at the map, like how you prioritize those projects, right? So if people are, if there's a plan to build the infrastructure in places where we know people are going regularly here in Colorado, is that am I making sense?
No, it makes sense. Yeah, I think in terms of like prioritization and that sort of right, like I think the gaps are probably the top of the list just to really enable that, like that statewide travel and access amongst all communities. But then redundancy is pretty top of mind. We have chargers in a lot of communities, but we may not have enough ports.
Right.
So if we have 2 ports in a given community, there may be demand in excess of that, and so developing either more ports at the same site or investing in new locations to provide that reliability and redundancy is a consideration. I think it's a motivation amongst like I think some of the communities that participate in the programs, right? Some will do level 2s, some will do fast chargers, right? A level 2 project is much vastly more affordable. Like maybe a dual port level 2 will cost you like ballpark 15,000. And if you do a project kind of at the minimum spec of plazas, you're looking at 600,000 or more. So it's a significant investment per site, and so if you do more ports than that, like many of the proposals we get are $1-2 million per site. Wow. Kind of thing. So to be a local government, like that's why you see kind of that the list, right? Like
Yeah.
there's of who's participating, and there are local governments, right, who are motivated and participating. There was an interesting study came out, gosh, last week
Mhm.
on kind of the economics and spending around charging infrastructure.
Mhm.
And so, right, it's long been talked about, like, yeah, put in charging infrastructure and people will spend more money at your site, in your community, because you have a little bit longer time than a typical gas fill up.
Mhm.
And so, right, that's just been like
Hmm.
talked about. And so now there's a study substantiating it, right? If you have 20 or 30 minutes, you're probably more likely to grab that cup of coffee, spend some money. I have I guess at the we have a scenic byways effort trying to electrify all of our scenic byways. So that kind of gets to your tourism
Yeah.
consideration, but I've tried to there's all these comments on like PlugShare and ChargePoint and elsewhere, like, hey, thanks so much for this charging station. One guy was like, I spent $500 in your shops. Thanks so much for putting this in place.
Mm.
I was like that, I had to screenshot that because it was just perfect, right? That's
Right.
what everybody's been talking about, but not, anyway, this study has substantiated that more investment in your community occurs around charging.
Yeah, I would think they kind of go hand in hand. So the question I have to that is, and thanks for sharing, it's really helpful. So as you're talking in terms of these charging stations outside of city governments, I saw that we do 50%, up to 50% of incentivizing for local gas station around. I think we had Doves up there. Yeah. And 7-Elevens, something like that. So what does that process look like? Are we approaching the private owners, or are they doing the RFAs? Is that what that's how that
correct?
Works? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So we do outreach, those presentations, there's recharge coaches. We'll talk with local communities or councils.
So how do they find out about those? Like if I own a gas station in Avon, how do I know that there's an RFA?
It depends on sort of the scale. The recharge coaches are one way. Amongst the charge point operators, I think we're pretty well known in terms of Colorado's on the map essentially of this is a
what charge point you said?
Charge point operators, like a CPO, so not just the company charge point.
Oh, I thought you meant just the company.
Yeah, the people who are, exactly, the people who operate
okay.
The chargers. I think Colorado is pretty well known as an area for investment because we have a lot of vehicles as well, and so you have a conducive environment to invest in this infrastructure because there's vehicles that are going to use it as well, which is important to them.
Yeah.
So we do outreach. There's national. I would say NEVI certainly kind of amplified the awareness of all the funding that's out there. So with that, right, in our first round of NEVI funding in plazas, we both had NEVI and Enterprise for the first time. We had about 110 million requested for about 20 million of awards
in the state.
Yeah. And so.
And what year was that?
That was 23.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that was last year. And then the second round was a little less, but it was about 60 million.
And of the other 110 million, how many, do you remember how many individual requests that was ballpark?
Oh gosh.
100, 200?
Oh, it was probably 30 maybe individual requests, 30 applications, but some of them 10, 15, 20 million in requests per single application, and some, 600 grand.
So for the whole state, there were 30.
Something like that. Yeah, I can dig that up.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but so the market demand that's out there certainly far exceeds our resources. But very aware of it, I would say. Yeah. We've had a lot of, we've had Charge Ahead Colorado, which is our kind of longest standing program.
Yeah.
Does level 2s and fast chargers. And we have, small convenience stores participate in that, kind of your more mom and pop convenience stores in places like Avon
or wherever.
Yeah, Shop and Hop over there. They've done a couple in Minter and Avon. So maybe.
Yeah, I think I've kind of dragged this out, but we can maybe chat later. I think that's something that's really valuable, with the tourism we have, obviously in the extraordinary progress we all have made, maybe looking at that number of applicants statewide and you know, measuring out kind of, as you mentioned, those spots along the corridors where we know people are going every weekend or whatever, like, yeah, just, you know.
We had a new data fellow start
Oh,
2
awesome.
weeks ago. And
Cool.
so we're gonna task him, Colton, this is his name. We're
Awesome.
gonna task
Yeah.
Colton with a whole bunch of analyses, so
Yeah.
this could be on the list.
Yeah.
It's very helpful to have these
Yeah.
kind of data jobs.
I
Well,
want to
thanks.
just be mindful of time, but
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a question in the chat from Lashida asking about if we have data on average usable uptime and reliability of the existing network. I might not have that in front of us, but I know obviously a question people often have is like how well operating, how often are the stations not broken?
Yeah.
So I don't know if we have that, we could follow up with that information.
Yeah, we don't have it. That's something that's not easy. It's something that we are working on via a couple different avenues, but right, there has been those national stories of, you know, other states with significant downtime. And so that reliability of the network and the uptime is very top of mind. And so, yeah, we're trying to dive into that via a couple different avenues to assess how our actual network is going. So that could maybe be if we get some tools developed to be able to like screen easily, maybe that's something we can share, you know, later on, but that's a project over this fiscal year.
Is there time for one more question?
Absolutely.
Has there been a conversation about doing like a universal charger? Like right now, I have an EV and I'm trying to do a trip to New Mexico, but I'm starting to notice I don't even know what it's called, like the
Yeah,
charger.
Plug
Yeah.
type, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's different, and
Yep.
now like I need to buy an adapter, and then I need to download different applications, so
Yep.
that's not really fun.
Yeah, in terms of the vehicles on the road, right, you're gonna be in that adapter situation. Basically, there is now a standard, which is NACS. It's the Tesla plug is the new standard. Every OEM is gonna do Tesla's plug, so that is I would call it the standard.
But that would be new vehicles though, right?
Correct. Yeah, and so they, you know, I think I saw Hyundai is the first OEM to actually have it built into their vehicles.
Yeah.
But everybody is moving that way. So last year, that was part of like the chaos, the charging network last year. You know, the feds tried to set a standard of CCS, which
We're
was
in a
not
messy
Tesla.
time.
And then, you know, every OEM, the vehicle manufacturers migrated to the Tesla plug type. So everybody's gonna have that. In terms of, you know, but that's 2025 and beyond, everybody will have those vehicles and those ports, but there's all the legacy vehicles that are gonna be using adapters. Most of the charging infrastructure that we're installing, you know, through this program is, right, CCS is what's required by the feds, but because every OEM is doing NACS, I would say most are including like a NACS port as well.
Yeah, I was about to ask that.
So yeah, so all the stuff coming in will have it. And then if you're Tesla, who has right their plug, you know, kind of native to their charging infrastructure, they're also including CCS ports. That's how they are eligible for the program. So on their chargers, they're including CCS. So all the vehicles should be able to use it.
So to her question, so like there's a port, I know there's a bank in Idaho Springs, right? Right there on the main street.
Yeah.
So I think they're all Tesla chargers. So if I have a 2019 vehicle, I can get an adapter and plug into that?
A lot of them have kind of what's called Magic Dock. Let's see, I'll see if that one has it, but you could look for Magic Dock. So they've retrofitted some of their stations with Magic Dock. So Tesla, you can use Tesla chargers with a non-Tesla vehicle. And then a lot of the new ones are being developed with that as well. And so if you're funded through one of our programs, and it's a Tesla charger, you are required to do CCS as well.
Okay. But right now, aren't our chargers right now universal or no?
They're not.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot that aren't. So
Oh,
a lot of them would just have CCS, right? If you're not Tesla, you were just doing CCS and the old Leaf one, which was
I've
Chad.
got a chat about my
Chat, yeah.
Pretty outdated.
Yeah, Chadmo got axed a couple of years ago,
Mm.
and CCS seemed like it was gonna be the standard
around, yeah.
because of all the money going into it. And then, right, everybody
Yeah.
shifted the market, and now, I mean, you could call the standard max at this
Mm.
point.
Okay.
But, yeah, so they're, like, I wouldn't discount like the Tesla infrastructure, because a lot of it has the whatever the magic dock, basically. So if you look at like PlugShare, it would say open to non-Tesla vehicles typically. And so it's Tesla and everybody else.
Are we going to upgrade like the Plaza chargers? For example, I drove to Sterling to an event thinking I could charge there.
Oh,
And when I showed up, it didn't work.
whoa.
So good thing one of our vendors had a level 1 and I was
Whoa.
able to connect to the municipal building, but it was like super slow.
The drip, yeah.
So then I don't know, they had some conversations with the event organizers and we found out there was a level 2 in like Holiday Inn. So,
Mm.
but that was kind of stressful finding that out.
Yeah, a lot of the corridor network, right, is built with CCS and CHAdeMO. We're not mandating a shift to Tesla, but we have, I guess, provided the opportunity to do so. And so it's gonna be up to the site host, whoever owns the chargers, right? So
Oh,
Sterling is owned by the town. You know, there's an additional cost to buying the port, but right, you're gonna open up additional opportunities. We'll probably, you know, we're requiring that they maintain CHAdeMO, you know, at least one port. Or so all of our corridor network will have at least one CHAdeMO port, and then.
Whoa.
It's working.
Sorry, if you're not in the city of Denver, they're testing emergency alert systems, so
Wow.
we all got our
That's so
phones
scary.
going off at the same time.
Man.
It's the fire alarm, oh my god.
Not opportune.
Is that a good transition, or do you have any more questions for Matt?
That was the sign.
I know we're way off schedule, but just because of that conversation, maybe it's worth adding that to EVCO or something, like a resource guide on just navigating plugs. Because we are at a messy time with the changeover, and I think there's loads of confusion if you're not deep in the world of EVs. That would be really helpful for the public.
And people buy vehicles without understanding it now, which is probably who's past that early adopter
It could
phase
be a
and more
resource.
into the,
Yeah, that dealerships could hand out to people even if they're not.
Last thing you want is someone to buy an EV today and then like realize a year later that, oh,
God,
I needed an adapter to do all the charging. It's not great. It's makes some very unhappy EV customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think to Isamar's point, if I'm, you know, I'm vacationing or I'm traveling, whatever, and I get out there and that happens, it just, you know what I mean? It just kind of fuels that conversation about, it's just not gonna work. So it's just a
Or I
thought.
can't drive my EV to the mountain.
it's more complex now, right? In the future, it's gonna be a whole lot easier with that consolidation of the market around the NACS plug, but also there's a lot of, I mean, there's millions of legacy vehicles that don't have it and won't be retrofitted.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for all the questions, helpful dialogue, I think. All righty. Let's see. We are, where are we at? Oh, yeah. KPI 10-year plan. I
Yeah.
guess some of this probably folds into that, I think, this conversation about plazas.
Definitely. Thanks, Reverend. So just wanted to, in the last meeting, started the conversation talking about the different key performance indicators or KPIs that we've identified in the CAE 10-year plan. Really trying to like, you know, are these the right KPIs? We want to keep on measuring these, or the other things we're looking for in this space that the board thinks is important to look at, and got some feedback from board members saying, hey, let's take a little bit of step back to talk about the data we're already collecting in our programs, and then also trying to get a better sense of like how these KPIs relate or also already are rolling into our existing programs. So my goal today is to kind of just walk through a little bit of talk about our programs, the data we're already collecting, how that, and then kind of how that relates to these KPIs, try to give the board a better sense of where we're at today, and then hopefully that will lead to, I think, further conversations about are these the right metrics or other metrics, et cetera. So let's see, and I also wanted to highlight, so again, these are the KPIs called out. The link on this page under economic development, that is actually the study that Matt was talking about, economic impacts.
I was just gonna ask. For a
Yeah.
copy of that.
So that's the link to that study, talking about the economic impacts of charging stations in communities. So if you want to take a look, deeper dive on that, it's a really interesting article about that topic. So I also wanted to call out that this is a KPI that was identified in the 2023 Colorado ED plan, and it really essentially speaks to the first two KPIs that were identified in the CAE 10-year plan. Really, like, what are the investments that we're making in disproportionately impacted communities, and also with low and moderate income Coloradans. So just like there's overlap, we have kind of different KPIs coming from places, but in this sense, they're very much like overlapping and doing the same thing, or getting the same questions. And so I did want to report out on this one is that we were doing some analysis and running some numbers, and over the last 2 fiscal years, this is combining both CAE and also all of the CEO electrified transportation programs. We are at about 49% of our funding meeting this criteria of going into DICs or being focused on low and moderate income Coloradans. So this is actually, a lot of this data is actually coming from, if everyone has not seen or doesn't spend a lot of time geeking out on the dashboard that is on the CAE website. This is actually just updated 2 days ago. So that 49% number is reflecting old data from the last time it was updated 6 months ago. So I haven't pulled this in yet. This is kind of what we're using as our analysis to like tracking spending in DIC. There's all kinds of stuff you can track here by program, by different funding levels. It's a really great resource. It doesn't have everything in it, but it's a really great resource to understand how our spending is happening. And we're taking a deeper dive into that data to really get a sense of it. But this is like the gold standard, or the best standard of kind of how we are trying to track our spending from both CAE and also other CEO electrified transportation programs. So I'm going to take a dive into, go through some of the major programs we have here. I also wanted to highlight some of the things. I'll go back up to this for a second. Some of these KPIs, again, those first two we're already tracking that to some extent. Geographic diversity is definitely something we're trying to track for all programs. And as I go into each of the programs, I'm going to share a little bit of our attempts to show some of that data out, because that's something that board members have requested in the past. Like, where are we putting stuff? Where is stuff being spent? So today I'm going to share a little bit out about that, and then there's more work to be done there. And then I also wanted to highlight that things like emissions benefits and the cost benefit of investments, that's something that Matt mentioned with data fellow Colton, who just started 2 weeks ago. This is kind of one of his first big projects, is to really like take all this data we're collecting across our programs and really get some more apples to apples, like what are the impacts of these programs, what are the costs of these programs. So I would just say for those two, we're really just starting that right now, and really starting to comprehensively look across our programs and try to get a sense of what those numbers are, so we can start doing like more apples to apples from a emission standpoint, equity standpoint. What are these impacts and how we measure those impacts? So this is, it's a little bit of just a lot of information on the slide. Really, again, trying to get to the questions that the board has, like what data are we collecting right now that relates to this, our first Charge Ahead Colorado program. So kind of trying to list out, here's what we have today that we're collecting. I'm not gonna read it out, that's on the list, but to get a sense of like, this is the data we're already collecting today. And then going through the KPI list, just getting a sense like, what are we already, actively looking at as for this program? So you kind of see, yes, no, sometimes it's not applicable. There's a KPI on clean truck alignment. And not many of our programs have a lot of alignment with the clean truck plan, the Fleet Zero does, but it's really just trying to get a sense of like, what do we already have data on that we can then turn into analysis. So some of the stuff we, again, we have that percentage of funding going to DICs with all of our new applications is have a DIC field. So we know over the last couple of rounds of Charge Ahead Colorado that this number of awards, this amount of dollars are flowing into disproportionately impacted communities. Those kind of highlight, this is again, map of Colorado, really just trying to say a little bit of a geographic sense of where we have completed sites across the state. The green dots are level 2 stations, the blue dots and squares, blue, purple dots are fast charging, and the blue shaded areas are disproportionately impacted communities. So I'm just trying to give a sense of where this is a completed sites, and then we also have this next slide here is a slightly larger map that also has awarded sites. So
This is on the site, right? This is on the website, or no?
this is actually not a publicly available.
Got it.
This is an internal dashboard
Okay.
that we have,
Okay.
and we have kind of talked about, do we want to make this,
No, I was just trying to clarify because I was
Public
looking at
facing.
that. It's like, I don't see it.
right? So we don't exactly have the information. There is a very similar
Yeah.
map on the Evaluate Colorado website, but that has kind of like all the charging infrastructure, not just Charge Ahead awards.
Yeah.
This is.
Well, one thing I noticed about this site is the green and the blue, like the DI communities seem to be, and obviously we're at a kind of high level than that, but seem to be outside of the sort of metro.
Right, you'd see like if we didn't have a bunch of green dots on top of it,
Right.
there's a lot of the
Okay.
city of Denver Metro. If we can zoom in on that map, you'd see there's a lot of DICs
Yeah, it would
in the
be good to
metro
have the
area,
metro
city of Denver,
area
Adams
going on.
County,
Yeah.
etc.
Mhm.
But it's been overwhelmed by us installing charging stations,
Mhm.
at least on this map.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to get a sense of like, we are the geographic spread of a program like Charge Ahead Colorado, while there's still places that we're not being, seeing things installed, I think we're seeing a pretty good coverage across a lot of the state with making awards into this. Into these.
Yeah. And then Mike, the last slide or the next slide. Okay, I'm sorry. That's the next slide.
I go to the next slide. So again, this is the same information, and I think, I'm not gonna like, maybe this is something we can kind of like reflect on, board members can take a deeper look at this, and we can have like another conversation about our next meetings. I know there's a lot of information to be sharing right now, to think about the data being collected for each program and the KPIs. But again, just trying to provide this information so that we have a little more of a baseline around, again, what we're tracking and which KPIs are we already looking at.
Yeah, I would just note like in general, which I'm sure is something most of us know, right? When it comes to disproportionate impacted communities, this data you have here in terms of spending yes, impact no, is like a huge factor, right? Because I could take the same $1 million that I put in a very access community or community that's very knowledgeable, familiar with, connected to whatever the innovation is, and take that same $1 million and put it in a disenfranchised community, and it takes much more time, right? And much more capacity building to really actualize those dollars and investments. And I think that's huge to know, right? That yes, no slide, because it just helps us to be reminded about the value of kind of getting that data. And obviously, you got a new data person, maybe that can something they can work on. But I just think it's exciting to see all the investment in DIC communities and having nothing to do with the energy office, but more to do with how our country has evolved. Like we can take that same money and put it in communities that are disenfranchised and know that it takes much more time and many more layers, I think, of capacity to really actualize it to the same level as another community can, right?
Yeah, and I would just highlight on the impact KPI, it's a little bit, I'll go back up to it's kind of undefined a little bit in the 10-year plan. We have the impact and a couple of examples
Right.
of what that might mean. So I think that would be a really good thing for us. What impacts do we want to measure?
Right.
How should we be looking at the
define
impact of these
I think so.
programs? Is it the economics? Is it the utilization and saying, hey, in a DIC, we see this level of utilization versus in another community? Are there inferences we can say like, well, we installed these DC fast charging ports and then
And more
the
people
next
bought
year,
EVs.
more people bought an EV in that.
Yeah.
DC registrations increase.
Right, and so
Right.
we have different pieces of data in that space, but we are not right now maybe connecting them. So that's something we can definitely look at, but I think it's also like thinking about, there's a lot of impacts we can measure potentially, and I think that's something we want to have a conversation about, like, okay, impact can mean a lot of things. What are the impacts that we think are most valuable for us as staff to like really dig into to understand how our programs are working? Is it emissions impact? Is it economic impact? Is it, increasing EV registration levels in DICs? There's lots of ways we could go with that one. So that's kind of like impact as we know right now, because I don't think we know we don't know what that is
Figured
yet,
that
but what
is-
it could
we
be.
need to define it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess on that note, the economic development piece, I know
Mhm.
brought that up before, so it's definitely of interest to me. That could tie in to impact as well, and it might lead to something like another layer of priority. You've got DIC priority, but even on top of that, you could have priority for small business, minority woman-owned businesses, anyone who meets that category who's applying gets a certain degree of priority as well. And we know there could be higher barriers to entry, certainly, for folks who might be competing against the 7-Eleven or something. Obviously, we want them to be successful at the end of the day, and maybe that comes with additional support too. But just thoughts on what that could mean for economic development and local impact. If stations are being positioned at certain types of businesses over another, for example.
Yeah, I mean, something I think it's interesting, how I think, trying to think like how we not get away from, but like, okay, we have the 7-Elevens of the world, and like how we also think about how our programs can support smaller businesses that might have the capital of companies like that to make these investments. So that's
an aspect of the Fleet Zero program. There's prioritization for like SBEs and those sorts of organizations. 99% sure there's an exclusion for it from NEVI, and I just sort of why it's not within plazas. We have the enterprise, we could evaluate it, award that funding to something, I guess, to remain, I guess, under consideration, right? Because we have the enterprise, it's not totally off the books, but we tried to remain as consistent as possible, to just streamline like the understanding amongst applicants.
Yes, no, I also understand that complicating things. Set the program back to
Again, plazas, again, this is similar to the map that Matt showed earlier, looking at just the awarded plazas program, trying to show like geographic spread of this, kind of the stars again are those priority communities identified. So, I think, again, trying to show we're trying to spread the love. It's not just programs happening in the city of Denver metro area, really trying to get the stations all across the state, if that was just sharing. Fleet Zero, I don't know, there's, because we don't have a huge amount of time, I don't want to spend a lot of time going through all these slides in painful detail, but definitely wanted to, this is the kind of stuff we're tracking and trying to understand how this program is being evaluated right now, I think. And then jumping in, go to kind of our infrastructure programs, talking again now about some other programs. This is the Vehicle Exchange Colorado program. So this is, again, it's kind of a very different data collection set. Our charging station programs, infrastructure programs, we tend to have like requirements about the data that's reported out from the stations. So this is very different how we're collecting data from this program. We really just kind of had a sense of where those rebates applications are happening, where the rebates are happening, but it's also at a county level. So we're tracking like they live in Larimer County. We are not tracking right now whether they live in a DIC. Something we could potentially do. Sarah's in the face that she knows the challenges of this. But it's like it's a different way we're getting data from that program right now. We're getting some demographic data as well from recipients. And I was hoping maybe I'd have a nice pretty map to show people. That is not in the cards for today. But I did want to kind of talk about, again, like we are with the VXC program, seeing, I think, some interesting, I think, spread of the program across. So the DOLA names classifies Colorado counties rural, rural resort, and urban. So that's the classification we're using here to like look at, you know, how many rebates per 1,000 residents. Looking at it per capita, because you look at it, you know, non per capita, it's just going to be like Boulder and Denver are the biggest ones number wise. But I think per capita helps paint the picture that the rebates are going into other counties. Now, I will admit that Hinsdale County has one rebate, but there's only like 700 people who live there. So it's doing really well on a per capita basis. But again, like we are seeing adoption happening in rural resort counties. It's not just happening with urban areas. But my hope has been to also have a map that kind of gives a heat map showing this data a little more intuitively. But again, redemptions have happened in 42 counties across the state out of 64. So we are seeing some good geographic spread. And I will also point out that, especially in the VXC program, this map is showing where vehicle dealerships that are participating in the program is. I would posit that while correlation is not causation, there's going to be a lot of challenges. It's really hard to get, there's obviously not a lot of dealerships on the Eastern Plains compared to the I-25 corridor or mountain areas. So that's one challenge we're having in the program. We've done a lot of outreach to get other dealerships outside of the kind of core areas we're seeing here. But it's not always easy. There's not a lot of dealerships there. They might not always be excited about selling EVs outside of this area. So that's just a challenge we're facing. And I think it probably has a little bit to do about if the closest VXC dealership is 100 miles away from where you live, it's probably going to limit your desire to participate.
I visited, sorry.
Yeah, please.
I visited Lyman and Burlington, I can remember, is it Burlington? And I had conversations with community members and they were hesitant about adopting EV, especially during winter, and they had some stories, so maybe that also has to do with, yeah, not dealers not interested in participating.
Yeah, definitely additional challenges, I think.
Yeah.
We got a couple hands up, Mike.
Oh, sure.
And Darius, I think maybe Darius put his hand down, but Paul's hand up for sure. Paul?
Yeah, if you could go back to that map that had the blue in it for the qualifying communities. Up a couple more, I think. There you go. I would love to get the underlayment for your blue zones, because I can't quite follow the county boundaries, but it almost looks like you've got Routt County has some diversity DI community space in it, and then all of Moffat, obviously, because we just launched a new program under our climate action plan. We've brought on a DI position, and it would help us understand if there's like, is it county boundaries, is it zip code boundaries, what y'all are using in that underlaying map would be hugely helpful for us up at the Sustainability Council.
Yeah, it goes to the census block group rather than the county level, so it is a bit more granular.
Okay.
And then there is on our website, we have a transportation equity screening tool where you can put in an address and get kind of a yes/no output. So, that's very available. And then I think you may be able to download the layer, but if you want the actual layer for like a GIS.
I don't want to tie up our limited time today, but if offline or after this meeting, you could help steer me to steer my teammates into this map, that would be hugely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you pull up that screening tool, put it in the chat? Hey.
Yeah,
And
we'll
then
put
the
it-
other map you had on the vehicle exchange program. I don't know if this is the time or place to do that. Struggling with dealerships to participate is great. We've always had an idea for the last couple of years to do like a kind of a car show where we could bring in used EVs but we're running into difficulties with the whole state. How do you sell car rules? Is there some way that we could make it a not necessarily tied to a dealership, but tied to events where people can come in and do those exchanges, have a fleet of vehicles that the old car show days, right? The swap meets where you could here's 10 cars, here's somebody with a license that can move those cars into the community without having to do a formal dealership. Because again, you'll notice up in the Northwest, we're part of your big blank zone up there. So how do we get that program into the hands of these smaller communities where maybe a dealership can't support the program 12 months out of the year, but we could do special events to help people do those exchanges?
That's an interesting thought, Paul.
So Paul, I don't know, I was gonna see if I could, loop in Ed, who's the program lead on VXC. I was seeing if he's online and able to talk. He could maybe try to quick answer the question, but if not, we can have him follow up with you after the meeting.
Yeah, either offline or maybe at another one of our regular meetings, but we've got lots of dealerships, they're just not big, and there's a lot more cars than a dealership wants to carry and all that kind of stuff. So I'd love to help make vehicles available to our community outside of this dealership model.
Hey everyone, this is Ed Pierce, Program Manager for VXC. Thanks for letting me join. We've participated in different ride and drive community events in different parts of the state, but that's definitely a conversation that we're happy to dive into deeper offline or at a future board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
I guess to that question also is just a quick follow-up. Are the recharge coaches kind of contracted to help recruit dealerships for this program as well?
Not really. We kind of are focusing this through more on like that community education aspect. But they do some reach outs to dealerships, just not mandating that for them. A big push this year was to spend a lot of time in counties and communities they hadn't spent time in previously. So, I think the year we'll kind of see, hopefully, if there has been a push in some of these areas. We haven't really had presence there before.
And I think for future meetings, I would like to have a discussion about the participating dealerships, because I have continued to help folks apply for the program, but they're monolingual Spanish speakers, and they have been asking me like, which dealership does it speak Spanish? And not only Spanish, but hopefully they speak other languages.
That would be something very easy for us to add to
The
spreadsheet,
spreadsheet.
like, yes, like the checkbox, right? And you can go here for, so,
Yeah, that's what I
be a matter of reaching out to dealerships.
Yeah.
Darius had his hand up a while ago. I'm sorry about that, Darius.
No worries, Mr. Chair. I'm curious on Mike, what your thoughts are around emissions reduction benefit, because I think that's extremely important in order to show what the overall effect of these programs are, which is to show that we're making a difference, not only in GHG, but I may make a suggestion that ozone is another particular problem when it comes to transportation. And a lot of tools out there can help with both determining GHG reduction from programs or from contributing to the overall goal of increasing EVs on the road, in addition to the benefits from ozone reduction, particularly in the non-attainment area of the Denver area and the North Front Range. So nothing today, but if you had any initial thoughts, would love to hear them.
Yeah, thank you, Darius. I think definitely our first part, I mean, I think the GHG reductions are the main thing we definitely want to track. But I think, again, you're right. All the air quality benefits are part of our focus as well. So like, how do we make the air cleaner in Colorado, especially in the non-attainment area? So I think you're correct that a lot of those same tools, you get, a kilowatt hour of electricity for an EV reduces X number of pounds of GHG. It also reduces X number of pounds of, NOx, VOC, carbon dioxide, PM. So a lot of those same tools, definitely something we want to do is make sure that we're talking about the air quality impacts of our programs as well. So definitely something we hope to be able to share when we are doing this analysis. I do know that we are 2 minutes away from the end of our meeting. I don't think there's anything, earth shattering the rest of my slides. Again, e-bike rebates, again, similar chart around where these are happening across the state, in different counties across the state, 55 counties for that one. So kind of just like a couple more programs we're going to talk about. That's really what I had there. I want to just create another minute or two at the end if any other questions or announcements before we adjourn for the day.
Yeah, so actually we were supposed to review
Yes.
the outcomes. Yeah. So what I can do is just I think everybody, I don't know if everybody got the document or not, but I can email the document out.
Okay.
And interestingly, one of the takeaways was building in time for more board dialogue.
Mhm.
So maybe maybe we can talk about that over lunch or something. But I'll just simply, in the interest of time, thank everyone for participating in those conversations and sharing your feedback with our the group that sat with us, and then we can spend some time next meeting going through those takeaways. And as I said, I'll email it out to everybody, or send to Mike the email, I guess. Yeah.
You should have gotten a link. I mailed it out yesterday, I think,
Okay.
or as an attachment, but we can also follow up again to make sure everyone had a chance, and hopefully we can have that as maybe we can have our first agenda item in our next meeting, so we don't have it stuck at the end of the meeting. So we can have that on our next meeting agenda. That works for everybody.
Yes. One technical note, I've tried to go back on a couple different occasions into the Google Drive to access previous slides.
Mhm.
I've had difficulty. I don't know if anyone else has, or it was just me, but it wasn't downloading and it wasn't showing an entire slide deck. So I don't know what was going on there. I wasn't sure if anyone else had.
If anyone else has had that issue, please let me know. I will definitely work with you, Laura, and figure out what might be going on with that. But definitely want to make sure that we're taking all the time to share this information that actually is shareable.
Yes, no, there's great stuff in here, so I want to make sure we can always go back to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
I helped jump to another.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Samara.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's time.
All right. We will go ahead and adjourn and make our way to lunch.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm gonna miss it. Next time.
Next time, Paul.